Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome everyone. Nice to see you here today. I'm Talia Chung. I'm the University Librarian and Vice Provost at the University of Ottawa. Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom c'est Talia Chung. Je suis la
Hello, I'm
bibliothécaire.
Talia John. I'm the lead librarian and vice provost at the University of Ottawa.
Co-president of CARL's Open Repositories Working Group. Je suis la présidente, la co-présidente du groupe de travail des dépôts ouverts de la BRC. Et je suis vraiment contente d'être avec
So I'm delighted to be with you today to welcome you to this very interesting session.
Well, to today's session, looking for a needle in a haystack, increasing the international visibility of Canadian research through the CARL-OpenAIRE collaboration. Please note that the session today has a simultaneous interpretation available. So if you would like to listen to the presentations in the language of the speaker, there's no need to make any changes to your settings. If you would prefer to listen to the session in either English or in French, there's a little interpretation box in your toolbar and you can go ahead and select English or French. Aujourd'hui, la session sera offerte avec
Today, we will be providing simultaneous interpretation. If you'd like to follow the presentations in the original language of the speaker, you can leave the system as is. If you would like to follow the session in English or French, there's an icon on your menu bar. Click on the interpretation icon and select your language. If you have questions or comments, please share them in the chat.
If you're experiencing any technical issues, don't hesitate to just pop it into the chat box. So as we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the land on which I have the privilege and the pleasure of living and working. I'm located here in Ottawa, which is the traditional land of the Algonquin Nation. The land remains unceded, and the University of Ottawa and I have the great privilege and pleasure of undertaking our lives and our activities here on Algonquin, traditional Algonquin territory. I would very much encourage you to acknowledge the land on which you're coming from, you're tuning in from within the chat box. So before we go ahead with the session, a few housekeeping notes. First, I would like to alert you to CARL's Code of Conduct, which we are using for this session. It's available in both English and French, and my colleague Lise has just popped it into the chat for your convenience and for your review. The organizers of this webinar are very much committed to providing you with a welcoming, professionally engaging, and safe experience. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to contact Susan Haig, who is CARL's Executive Director, and whose email Lise will also add to the chat box. Thank you, Lise. Merci, Lise. I'd also like to take this chance to remind you that the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the CARL YouTube channel in a few days. Please don't hesitate to share with everyone on the session any useful links or information that comes across, springs to mind as you listen to the session. This is very much an interactive opportunity, and I encourage you to do so. As well, the question and answer functionality is being turned on, so you could also feel free to enter your questions through the Q&A button. So without further ado, I'd like to now turn it over to the session's moderator, Kathleen Shearer, who's the research associate with the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, but as well the executive director of the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thanks very much, Talia. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to introduce you to OpenAIRE, which is a European Commission funded service for open science, and discuss the ongoing collaboration that between OpenAIRE and CARL have been having over the last 5 years. So OpenAIRE is, among other things, a discovery service, and it harvests content from a huge number of data providers and publishers around the world, and works to identify relationships between content and institutions and funders. And Natalia will tell us, of course, more about that during her talk. And CORE has been involved in this collaboration with the aim really of getting Canadian content into the open-air aggregation and creating those affiliation informations. So CARL launched a task force several years ago under the auspices of the Open Repository Working Group, and a lot of work has been done since then with an initial group of implementers to develop resources and support for Canadian institutions to be harvested by OpenAIRE. So this webinar really marks the next phase of the project, where we want to expand from these early implementer group to all Canadian institutions and bring them into this discovery service. So today we have a rather full program. Natalia is going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a few questions after her talk, and then we'll move on to the other presenters, and hopefully at the end we'll have time for some questions as well. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Natalia Manola, who's the CEO of OpenAIRE, and she's based in Athens, Greece. Natalia, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with us. And please go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you very much. It has been, first of all, I would like to say thank you for the collaboration, because this is what we all need for the future, as I will briefly touch upon my talk. Thank you, to CORE for bringing this collaboration in the center. And I will just go ahead and explain what we're doing. So it's the needle in the haystack. It was very, the title was very fitting. What I would like to do before I present the collaboration, the Canadian OpenAIRE collaboration, is I would like to say a few things about open science in Europe and about OpenAIRE, so I can put some context in this collaboration. I will be very briefly here. Open science, we know what it entails. We are touching now upon open access to publications, but I think we are moving beyond that. We're talking about open data, open research data. We're talking about fair data. Now we are discussing software and open hardware. So open science is here to stay, is a state of mind, is a state of work, is different. So where is our position, and how do we move into this maze? Open science in Europe, it's a long journey, and this is why you will see that OpenAIRE is a bit more advanced than the other continents, is because we started early. The European Commission started from the framework program. Every 7 years we have a framework program, from open access pilot to publications. Then we moved from a pilot to all publications of the framework program being available to all. We started, if you see, on an open access to data. Then we went to open access data by default. And now we are in the era of EOSC, the European Open Science Cloud, when we're talking about not everything open, especially for the research data, but at least fair, that it's findable and accessible. And the Horizon Europe is the current framework program that has started, where the open science is the modus operandi. And when we talk about these framework programs, you need to have in your mind that this is the European Commission funding for research, but every country in Europe has different fundings, and they more or less they're starting to follow what is being done by the European Commission. And I have to say that the European Open Science Cloud has been a catalyst in that, and now in every university, or in most libraries, in most universities, in every funder mind, it's the European Open Science Cloud. So how can we make it happen? Let me see. And this is where OpenAIRE started, and this is where we became a legal entity. A few more words on OpenAIRE is now we are a non-profit organization established in 2018, based in Europe with member states and organizations being part of our members, who are now CORE is the newest member in OpenAIRE. We have 47 members from 34 countries in Europe, and then you can see the momentum and the push we are into that. So this is about open science, and not so much about because open science has many connotations, because as I showed in the first slide, it's about open resources, education resources, open hardware. Here in OpenAIRE, we can focus on all, but we focus on the open scholarly communication. This is our focus. So how have we built OpenAIRE and how we're working? Because again, this is all relevant in our collaboration with around the world. So we have two parts of an infrastructure. It's the human part and the technical part, and they are, I'm not sure, depending on the topic and the question, I'm not sure which is more important than the other. I think they are equally important, and one cannot exist without the other. So on the part of the human, we have a community of practice where we have in every country, in every member state. And if you want to have the parallel in Canada, think about regions, provinces, think about cities. So we have the ambassadors, the experts, the trainers, the implementers. So we have organizations that assume a role of the open science or open access ambassador, okay? And that has many things associated with it, many functions and many activities. And what we have tried to do is to make these ambassadors as to empower them with best practices. They are the organizations, the people who share the best practices with the organizations in their country. And then on the technical side, we are talking about federation interoperability. OpenAIRE is not building a new infrastructure. We're just federating, and we are interoperating. We're connecting existing infrastructure. So investments happen at the university levels, investments happen at the regional level or at the country level. What we are there to do is to build these umbrella technologies in order to federate and connect and exchange information. How do we work? We have three main pillars of action. One is the services, and I will go very briefly on the services. So it's about connecting. So we are connecting repository, open access journals, interoperability. We're now into metrics, because this is the essence of the research assessment, and metrics is in the essence of open science. And of course, research data management. Then our next focus is on training, which is we have a very, very strong training infrastructure with the people, with the National Open Access Desks of OpenAIRE, where we construct and develop material, and then each of us in our country goes on to train people from awareness level, from legal issues, from data management issues, from funding, anything that you can imagine. And then on policies is, as I said before, the European Commission has a very good policy on open science, but now member states are stepping up in order to have their own policies, either at the national level or the institutional. And what we have found is that we need aligning. We can't have too many different policies coexisting if we want to make it forward. So this is where also we are stepping in. Services. I will talk briefly about services, and we have services because we are at the end, we are a service provider for the European, not for the European Commission, but for Europe and the states of Europe. So we have, many of you are aware of Zenodo, which is a repository, catch-all repository for for data or publications. We have Argos, which is a data management plan. We have Amnesia, which is how to anonymize and share your data. And then we have in the middle a whole suite of services, which are what I would call the middleware for content providers, is where we aggregate the content, the metadata or the data, if we're talking about publications, the PDF, where we make sure that everyone is aligned to the guidelines or to the proper best practices and metadata formats, where we have services that they link publications to data, where then we have the broker that exchanges back this data to the repositories if we find that that we make it better, and then we can exchange it. And then we have on the last line, we have services for research communities and researchers and SMEs. So as you can see if you browse through our portal, we have services for all actors. And this is important to note because we're setting up repositories, but then you can have a plethora of services related to content aggregated from repositories and the needs of researchers and the needs of research managers, the needs of librarians, funders. So when we're talking about open scholarly communication, we need to think of services that cover, a wide coverage of actors. And this is very important to see. I will talk briefly about the OpenAIRE Research Graph because this is the basis for our collaboration with Canadian Association of Libraries as it started. I will be very brief here. You can find more information on the link. So knowledge graphs. Kathleen told me, okay, not many people know about the graphs, but I think, this is now, everyone knows probably about the Facebook graph and the social networks. So what we have here is a network of entities, of scholarly communication entities. So an organization linked to people, linked to funding, linked to research results, and so forth. How is this all connected? And if this is all connected, uniquely identified all the entities, then you can really ask very nice questions and you can get answers to say, what is the production of my institution? How many, what is the production on social science and humanities in my institution versus, let's say, nanotechnologies? What is, how much open science am I doing? All these nice questions that you can only very fast query and get answers only if you have all these entities very well connected together. So OpenAIRE is trying to make this graph not only about open science, but the whole scholarly communication graph. And then we're focusing on open science because at the end of the day, we care about open science. So the idea is how to make every entity from now on, every research product from now on, to make it open, and how can it be connected? Because it's just the volume nowadays is too much. And, even if you have, 3 million publications every year just in English, then it's not easy. So you need to somehow put this research in context. So I'm not going to go over this because I think the audience is aware of this. But in OpenAIRE Research Graph, we're trying to make this huge database well connected together in order to ask these questions that we care about. Just some numbers. We have 120 publications in this graph, metadata for publications. We only have about 15 million text. Research data, software, other research projects, which the libraries can come very nicely here and just classify and identify these products. From about 30 funders, this 23 is an old number, aggregating from about 90,000 content providers. I have just put 4 publications only, the open access. So you can see that half of it is open access, which on a global scale, I think, it's good. We can do better now with open science policies, but I think it's okay. Now, coming back to this CARL-OpenAIRE collaboration, what did we do? So OpenAIRE has been aggregating content from around the world. And I have to say that this is this is some very heavy, I would say, computing machinery is underneath, because we have a workflow where we aggregate this content, we deduplicate, we disambiguate, we have all these AI algorithms on top, and then we are producing this graph. Are we perfect? Not yet. Are we going to be ever perfect? Probably not, because no one is. But we are in very, very good shape, I think. So based on the graph, the CARL-OpenAIRE collaboration, first of all, I would like to say, some facts on the why. So, why does OpenAIRE, since we get money from the European Commission to deliver something for Europe, why do we care about that? And I think, why does CARL or other associations around the world, they care to make these synergies? First of all, we all know that research is global. So whatever we do in Europe, and it cannot stay in Europe. Whatever you are doing in Canada cannot stay in Canada. Researchers, they collaborate globally, so research is global. And I think this is one of the very, very strong points of publishers or the companies that are providing us with the services for metrics and tracking, because they have a global overview. So what we need, our vision is to have a global open infrastructure with decentralized nodes. So what we would like to do as OpenAIRE is to have communities around the world, one like OpenAIRE here, one in CARL like in Canada, and we work together with shared responsibilities, shared resources, shared governance on our vision. What we see is that libraries are in the center, and we view them as the community of change. And libraries, I think all libraries around the world are stepping up. We see that very, we welcome it. A new role in the open scholarly communication infrastructure. Is it clear? No, but it's getting to be clearer. And then what we need to do at the global level, we are doing that within OpenAIRE. We're doing it, from member state to member state. We're learning from each other. And we're not just sharing content. We're not just learning best practices, but we're also sharing know-how and technologies, because this is important. Resources, not every country has the same resources, or they are as mature as their neighbor. But what we're trying to do is that we become, we align and we become equal partners in this whole endeavor. And still we see this open access to, gold open access and all this. Repositories still have a key role in the true federation. Why am I saying that? Because no matter how much open access in gold or open access publishing we see, is that technically we see many barriers for accessing from machinery. So you can access with a click on a website, but this is not very relevant in many cases because of the volume. So you need machines to access it, and then we have barriers. We have barriers or slow innovation. So what we think and what we see very tangibly and very concretely is that repositories, they have a key role in the federation and the new innovative services. The Explore Canada portal. So our group worked with your group, and we have a subset. We have now the beta, which is going to be going on production. We have a beta portal, which we call, OpenAIRE Canadian Explore. That's the name that we gave it, but it can change. This is based on our graph only, without aggregating so many Canadian repositories. Is we have found, based on affiliation to Canadian universities and to funders, Canadian funders, we have found about 2 million publications, research projects, research data linked to 2,000 projects. Some of the numbers that you can see here, for example, for 3 Canadian funders that we have semi-automatically curated, is that we have the Canadian Institutes for Health, you can see that we have 55 research outcomes, that 35 came from mining from full text. And again, this is why it's important to have the whole payload of the publication, and then perhaps, you know, some of the data. Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Canada, Council of Canada, Social Science and Humanities Research Councils. So you can see that just by doing this pilot, we have some very good results to show. What are these? What are the next steps? The next steps is, I think, you know, is that as Kathleen said, is that we would be expecting a full operation in Canada to have repositories very much aligned with the OpenAIRE guidelines and this aggregation, so we can have, you know, participating in the global content sharing, but also the Canadian. But what we see, the additional curated content. So I see two things, you know, in the next step, because Kathleen asked me to elaborate on this a bit. OpenAIRE guidelines for service providers. Literature repositories. We know that you're setting up RDM, research data management, and research data repositories. We're talking about software. We're talking about CRIS systems. We would like to see Canada, you know, through CARL, to have a holistic view on the research products. And of course, it's not only that, we would like to work with you on the usage data, because what we would like, the next step is, okay, the first step is to exchange the content, but then we would like all to see what is the uptake of this content. So, you know, what are the clicks and downloads? So we are working on setting up a more global, let's say, infrastructure of metrics. We have the open citations and the Crossref that has opened the citations on one hand, and then we have the usage counts from repositories for the time being. We will see, you know, if we get them from publishers. So think about, you know, how repositories can play a big role in making sure that all these numbers are very well communicated to everyone. And then the second part of this curated content is the open orgs. This is the new OpenAIRE service that we're dealing with a plethora of organization names and IDs in the scholarly communication world. So a university or a research organization has many names and has many IDs that it appears. So I just picked McGill University. We found in about 5 or 6 databases 2 different names. But if you see about, you know, the numbers here, it has many different IDs that it appears. And of course, it has many related organizations. This comes from ROR. Is it, you know, institutes of McGill's? Is it organizations that it has, it's dealing with? We don't know. But at the end of the day, the scholarly record needs to have these entities disambiguated. And then the second thing that we would like to work with you, and especially within the UNESCO global initiative, is the tracking of open science. So what is the open science? Because that will give us a very good understanding of, you know, what works, what doesn't work, what is the future. So we're building the Open Science Observatory. Now it's a European one, but we could very well envision it very regional and very or global, where we have, you know, all these numbers from the graphs. Now we are building, let's say, we're building more advanced indicators. So those, I'm just showing the numbers, the history, but we can have, you know, more, because we're doing more work to say, okay, what is the gold versus the green open access publication? And what is important is that we can have that per country or per region or per institution. And this is important as a I would say, shared tool, an open tool for all of us to work together and see, you know, how to shape our future. And I think, Kathleen, I took a couple of minutes more, but this is it.
No, that was terrific. Thank you so much, Natalia. I think that really helped, you know, target and give us very pragmatic examples of what OpenAIRE is doing and what OpenAIRE can do for us. I just wanted to qualify one thing, that the term open science is commonly used in Europe, but open science is a very broad term, and it really refers to open scholarship. So in this context, we're really talking about certainly humanities and social sciences research, not just the hard sciences. And the second thing I wanted to say, there's one question in the Q&A that I think we'll try to take a short response from you from, but the second thing I wanted to emphasize is, this is open, community governed infrastructure, and that's really where the community is starting to realize we need to move. I was at a meeting in the middle of the night in Asia where there were different Asian countries sharing, their open access activities, but what they use to measure their research outputs are the commercial products, Scopus or Web of Science. And what we know is those products do not reflect local journals, they don't reflect content in repositories. And so it's really, really important that we have, and they favor, those commercial products favor the journals that they are working with and are affiliated with. So what we really want is to support and advance this non-commercial infrastructure. And we're very lucky that in Europe, you have welcomed Canada into the fold to be able to benefit from the work that you're doing. So on that note, I'd just like to quickly, I think we only have time for one question because I don't want to run too far over the hour. So I'm gonna, and I partially answered Leah's question, but maybe you have some response too. So what key weaknesses do you think exist in commercial publishing product landscape that we can use as talking points to help advocate for open air investment with our local university senior administrators? For example, Cyvel Pure, they tell us everything.
I think what we need to say, you mentioned some, so, is not full coverage, especially in some cases, even though Canada may not have this issue. Transparency is, for example, when we're talking about new metrics and research assessment for open science, then I'm not sure I would trust something that is closed. Okay, and especially the metrics and the algorithms behind those are closed. And this is something that we have just, I was talking about it today about how the European Commission will be setting up their monitoring system. Again, what I think is true to Leah is that at some point we're going to have, two parallel strands, the commercial and the non-commercial. What is important for the commercial one is to have more than one or two players, is to have smaller organizations, SMEs we call them in Europe, so startups or smaller companies, that they will be able, based on open content, to provide you with the services. It's not just the open air investment. I would see it not open air in Europe, but open air, your investment in your library as part of a global organization. So this is what I would say. Are we ready, for example, to pick a work with Cyvel or Pure? I'm not sure, but it's about what you want to do for the future. Do you want to rely on just one vendor? That's the question that you need to ask yourself.
Thanks very much, Natalia. So I'm just cognizant of the time, so I will turn it over to our next speaker, who is Matthew Lucas, Executive Director of Corporate Strategy and Performance at Shirk, which is the Social Science and Humanities Research Council. Matthew, please, the floor is yours, and go ahead and share your screen.
Thanks, Kathleen. Yes, I will share my screen. Please let me know when you can see that fine.
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you, Kathleen. And first of all, I would also like to thank both the organizers of today, but Kathleen and Susan in particular, on behalf of my colleagues at the NSERC and CIHR, for involving us in this project from the get-go. As you'll see from this presentation, we view this project as key to helping us realize the vision we've had for making federally funded research more available to Canadians and indeed the world. and more importantly, used in interesting and innovative ways. It's a vision that was extended by the Federal Roadmap on Open Science, developed by Dr. Mona Niemer, our Canada Chief Science Advisor, and really pleased to be a part of this project. I'm going to talk to you today relatively quickly, provide a bit of a background on our open access policy on publications, because it's very relevant to the work we're doing on this project. Talk about the benefits we're seeing from the partnership with OpenAIRE and CARL, some of the work we've done to try to understand compliance of our policy, and then a few takeaways and next steps that the agencies are looking at. So just very quickly, you will recall that in 2015, we launched our harmonized tri-agency open access policy, which has two requirements, or has two pathways to the requirement that publications be made freely accessible 12 months after the publication deadlines. And as I mentioned, the vision here is to make information accessible, but of course also to see it used in interesting ways. And related to this policy, we see two strong benefits coming out of this project. One, of course, to make Canadian open access research outputs more visible. Until this project came along, there really wasn't a tool that could be used to search and find open access articles, either for the broader community or even for the agencies. We've been operating a little bit in the dark in terms of which of our publications are indeed open access, and I'll talk about work we've been doing to try to shed light on that. And then to help us keep track of open access trends, both broadly, because of course we are part of a global work on improving access and part of the broader open science conversation that's going on among funding agencies across the world, but also helping us to really understand how our own policies are being complied with and finding ways of monitoring those in an efficient manner. You may recall there was a 2018 study in Nature that talked about compliance with the open access policies among the granting agencies. That study found that the compliance wasn't great. Coming from the social sciences, Shirk in particular, or research funded by Shirk in particular, was not finding its way, according to this article, into open access publications to a degree that we had hoped to. And so when we were approached with the idea of this project, the opportunity to provide an additional information about open access compliance rates was extremely valuable to us. We also internally, based upon some of the data we were getting from OpenAIRE and also cross-referencing that with World of Science and doing some very labor-intensive checking for false negatives, conducted a tri-agency study on open access that I'll just show you a quick graph on, but I can speak to in more detail afterwards if there is more time for questions. And this study, as I said, looked at all of the articles that we kind of knew were open access, but then took a look at articles that we understood were not open access and did a labor-intensive review to see if we could find those articles through other means. And indeed, thankfully, that project proved you could find those articles. And we've been working with Kathleen and the team to find ways of making those more visible through the OpenAIRE portal. It is still challenging to find these. It is still challenging to understand as agencies how we build the monitoring for compliance into our application process, and also how we can understand where the challenges remain in making things open access and how we can help fill those gaps or address those challenges. And I would say it's not a fringe benefit to being a part of this project. It's actually one of the key benefits is that it's brought around the table all of the key stakeholders dealing with open access, open science, both within the government of Canada and across the research ecosystem. And it's been really valuable, both to understand how we can work together to advance open access, but also the various initiatives that are underway. And there are a lot of initiatives underway across the country. Just takeaways and next steps. As I mentioned, we're working both in conjunction with this project and with across the tri-agencies to better understand some of the barriers to open access. We recognize that our own policy may not be as well understood as we'd hoped, and so looking to find ways of promoting different avenues to open access for our researchers. And then also recognizing that without good data, without good links in the data itself, such as funder acknowledgement, such as links to funder application numbers, it makes compliance much more difficult. So internally, we are doing a lot of work to develop persistent identifiers that we haven't had in the past and make them publicly available related to applications, which can then be linked to publications and can be linked to data sets and the like, so that the vision that I think many of us have of being able to understand from an agency point of view, what do we fund and what are the outcomes of that research and who's using that research will be much easier to realize in the future. And I'll just say, both in this project, but also throughout our work on open access, throughout our work on research data management that was mentioned earlier, our relationship with librarians has been key. And it's been a real pleasure working with CARL and working with many of you on this and other projects. And with that, again, I just want to thank the group for including us. And at the end of this presentation, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about the work that we're doing as agencies, or where we would like to see the world of open access and open science more broadly moving in the future. Thanks, Kathleen. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Matthew. And hopefully people can stay a little past the hour, because I think we're going to probably run a little bit past the hour. And if people can stay, we'll have some time for questions then. But I will quickly turn it over now to our next speaker, who is Vivian Lewis, University Librarian at McMaster University and the current president of CARL. So the floor is yours, Vivian.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I've personally learned so much during the last few minutes. This has really been wonderful. So bonjour, good day, everyone. It is a great honor for me to speak to you today about an issue of such critical importance. Of course, enhancing the international visibility of Canadian research. But in truth, I'm actually speaking to you from two perspectives. First, as the president of CARL, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, which of course is the voice of 29 research libraries in Canada and our 2 federal institutions. And of course, enhancing research and supporting higher education is a critical part of the CARL mission. But I'm also speaking to you today from my perspective as a CARL Library Director. And so I hail from McMaster University, which is a research-intensive university in Hamilton, Canada. And McMaster University operates MacSphere, which is our campus's institutional repository. And MacSphere holds approximately 20,000 research dissertations, working papers, and articles from across all disciplines. And we also host the university's Research Information Management System, RIMS, or CRIS, as Natalia described. We lead the campus's research data management service, and we're building strong expertise in bibliometrics. And we're very much like many of our CARL peers. And I'm very proud, actually, to report that our digital repository librarian, Gabriela Mircha, serves as a member of the CARL Open Repositories Working Group. And largely through Gabriela's efforts, McMaster serves as the host site for Canada Research, which is the metadata aggregator that's been built to actually help OpenAIRE harvest the records from Canadian repositories that are not able to adopt the OpenAIRE guidelines. So CARL and its member libraries have been promoting open access for many, many years. And much of our more current work, I would say, builds from a seminal document released in January 2017, the CARL Scholarly Communications Roadmap. And the roadmap acknowledges the need for open, sustainable, effective, and innovative scholarly communication system. But we want that system to be controlled not by commercial entities, and this harkens back to some of Kathleen's comments earlier, but we want the system to be actually overseen by the scholarly community itself, and with research libraries playing a critical role in that work. And the document speaks extensively about the need to build awareness of open access, about the need to promote and to accelerate the adoption of open access policies, about lowering economic barriers. But we recognize at the time that we wrote this, that the scholarly communication system is quite complex, and we could not resolve all of the systemic issues on our own. And so we committed ourselves, as we commit ourselves today, to act nationally and coordinate internationally. And so this focus on international collaboration has become quite critical in our engagement with OpenAIRE. And the need for academy-built solutions, I think, is becoming increasingly clear. Earlier this year, SPARC issued its landscape analysis and roadmap for action. And the document noted that a small group of commercial vendors control an increasing proportion of academic publishing, including courseware publishing and data analytics. And SPARC expressed concern that the actions in many cases were governed more by profit than they were for a desire to open up science. And this need is actually echoed in the UNESCO recommendations for open science, which will be voted on by member states in November 2021. The UNESCO recommendations describe science as a common good, requiring international and multi-stakeholder cooperation. And the authors suggest that community-built efforts to support open science are crucial to ensure long-term sustainability. We have good policies here in Canada issued by the tri-agencies, and we've heard from Matthew just before me, mandating open access and research data management. But historically, research libraries managed institutional repositories independently, and each one of us building our own platforms as local implementations. And they were very much institutional repositories, compiling the scholarly output of one institution, one university, department by department. And in more recent years, we've begun working to add new functionality to our repositories and to improve the findability of the content across our various implementations. Now, in November 2017, CARL established the Open Repositories Working Group with the objective of building a national strategic agenda for repositories in Canada. And in January 2018, not that long ago, we announced the collaboration with OpenAIRE as part of this OpenAIRE Advanced Pilot Project. The intention was to create a gateway for Canadian content with a particular focus on tri-agency funded projects. Now, an extraordinary amount of work has been done in the intervening months by the working group's task force on OpenAIRE, led by Pierre Lasso, who we will be hearing from shortly. And the work has been ably coordinated by the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, CORE. In July 2020, CARL published Investments in Open, a comprehensive survey of library expenditures on services, staff, and infrastructure in support of open scholarship. The document illustrated a fairly wide range in investments across our various enterprises. And the results, while extremely impressive, led many of us to commit ourselves to increasing that investment over time. So in my remaining few minutes, I just wanted to reflect on the benefits of participating in OpenAIRE from a library director's perspective. I'll focus on 5 particular benefits, and I believe they align quite nicely with Natalia's earlier comments. So first and foremost, libraries and those of us who work in them care deeply about increasing the visibility and the findability of research to serve the public good. And we have spent many, many years trying valiantly to convince researchers that open access is the right decision. And the pandemic has only made this need to make research visible all the more pressing. And so OpenAIRE's ability to make scholarship more visible and more findable is critically important. Second, we want to contribute to building a truly global research source, something bigger than any one institution or even any one country can do on its own. Third, we see the clear value in having the Academy build and manage its own solutions in fixing the publishing ecosystem. And we really like the open source nature of OpenAIRE, and we like the fact that it's built by our own community. Fourth, we do want to increase the value proposition for our own researchers. Our researchers are looking to have their research visible on the world stage. And knowing that our repositories can deposit either directly or through the aggregator will put their work where it needs to be seen and needs to be used. And then finally, as library directors, we want to leverage the investment we have already made in our repositories. We want to push the boundaries of our current platforms. We want to adopt that new functionality. And we want to leverage the expertise of our own repository managers and other staff to expand their skills and open up their networks. And so in conclusion, I began my remarks with a reference to the CARL Scholarly Communications Roadmap. And I'm closing by circling back to that seminal document. The CARL-OpenAIRE collaboration is helping us realize our vision laid out in the roadmap to create an open and sustainable system, to have that system governed and managed by the community, to flag the critical importance of research libraries in that work, and finally, to reflect our committed intention to act nationally and coordinate internationally. So I hope I haven't moved through these slides too quickly, but I'm going to stop here and turn the floor or the tiles back to Kathleen. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Vivian. That was great. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our last speaker, last but not least, Pierre Lasso from University of Laval and chair of the CARL-OpenAIRE Task Force. Pierre is going to put some real practical aspects on the discussion today and show you what we've done already through the collaboration. And so, Pierre, the floor is yours.
Merci, Kathleen. Merci.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I will be speaking French for this portion. However, the slide deck will be in English. Here, we wanted to end on giving you some real examples of how this works in our participation to OpenAIRE. I will talk about the two strategies that were defined for the participation of Canadian institutions to OpenAIRE, and then I will end by showing you a glimpse of the next webinars, which will be practical sessions on implementation. So here, I will go through the context quickly. You've heard about the CARL roadmap on scholarly communications. There was a statement on core on the next generation repositories that started our reflections in Canada on establishing a distributed infrastructure of institutional repositories. The goal was to see how we could participate in existing infrastructure rather than reinventing complete infrastructures. This collaboration between CARL and OpenAIRE started in 2018 with the creation of the Open Repository Working Group that served to monitor the collaboration We also had some deliverables in the OpenAIRE Advanced project with a sub project to create an aggregator for Canadian content. This aggregation is one of the main assets of our participation to OpenAIRE. The content aggregation is done from different sources. You've seen this. This is done through the OpenAIRE research graph. There is Canadian editors, and if we connect our repositories, that content would be aggregated and added. A fundamental idea is to establish links. I think that was well described previously. Connections between publications, funders, and publications and research data, and try to delimit links within an interface and infrastructure. So how can your local repository can take part in this? How can it take part in OpenAIRE? It all depends on metadata guidelines. And more specifically, if we look at the OpenAIRE guidelines for literature repositories, version 4, more specifically, which is the most relevant. How can your institutional repository be visible in OpenAIRE? There are two strategies. You can do this yourself. You can do direct harvesting of data in your repository, or you can take part in some of the initiatives that were mentioned by Vivian through Canada Research. If you have questions on data repositories, Portage under Andrio, that is now the Alliance, has done some work that the aggregated data is in OpenAIRE. So the work has been done. So you can do this through Andrio or the Alliance. These are not turnkey scenarios. If you choose direct harvesting of your data through OpenAIRE, it will require some development time. There are some adjustments to make, even though some solutions exist. There's a patch from DSpace, and for ePrints, there's also a plugin that was developed by Concordia University. That's part of the work, but you still have to make some efforts for compatibility. Now, for harvesting through Canada Research, this is mainly intervention on metadata to amend metadata to make sure everything passes correctly. There's a certain effort to be done at that level. And you've seen in the previous presentation, the system that enables OpenAIRE to amend or enhance institutional data. Once you participate and your data is contributed, it is possible to enhance the way your data is represented in the OpenAIRE infrastructure by amending this and the way it represents institutions. Let me give you some examples. Some Canadian institutions are compatible with the version 4 guidelines. This was done through pilot projects under the OpenAIRE working group. And I will conclude by inviting you to our next workshop sessions. The invitations have not been sent, but they will be sent shortly for session 2, which will be dedicated to OpenAIRE implementation. We will look into the details of what has to be done to participate directly to OpenAIRE, to see what you have to do to participate to Canada Research. And there will be a last session dedicated to discussion groups, so we can answer all your questions on how to participate to OpenAIRE. If you have technical questions, it will be the opportunity to ask them. We will have some experts that have conducted implementations that will be able to answer your questions. And that's it for me.
Merci beaucoup, Pierre.
Thank you very much, Pierre.
It's 12:01. I see that some people have to leave, but I'm wondering if the speakers can stick around for another 5 minutes or so, and 5 or 10 minutes, and we can just take some questions. If you want to turn on your cameras. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, great. So there are a couple of comments in the Q&A, but I'll move directly on to the question here, which is to Matthew. Matthew, has the report on OA compliance been published?
Deciding how we're going to make this more publicly available. So we are hoping to do that, but it has not been published yet. But if you have any particular questions, feel free to get in touch with me, and we'd be happy to share some of that information with you.
Okay, I invite the audience to put any more questions into the Q&A. Please go ahead in your preferred language. While we're waiting for some other questions, if they do arrive, I'd like to ask Natalia one question, because I think one of the challenges with open infrastructure is the issue of sustainability and sustainable funding. And I wonder if you've had discussions in the context of OpenAIRE in terms of what that future looks like for you. I know generally you've been funded through European Commission funding. So do you have a kind of a sustainability plan going forward for OpenAIRE in the future?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. I think this is the hot question that every public infrastructure and open infrastructure it's a holy grail. So we have opened the discussions. We are opening the discussions with our members. So there's as I said, in OpenAIRE we have the OpenAIRE, the association where we move all together, and then we have the services. And the cost of the services are not negligible. The cost of bringing everyone together, you can think of like an other member association. These are something that we are now looking at. So we're looking at all our numbers, like the KPIs from the downloads, views, and from the graph. We're talking about millions of hits every day. We're now trying to put more of a. We don't want to put barriers on the access, but we would like to know as a first step who's using the data and for what. And the same is for the other services, because we have Zenodo. For example, just take Zenodo. The European Commission has paid for Zenodo, but it's being used by researchers around the globe. So 50% is used by Europe and 50% is used by outside the world. So how can we go on funding it? Because now with the research data, they require more and more storage. And that means not just new storage, but also the backups, everyone wants to, it's an archive. So we are looking, and as I presented the various services, each of them may have different ways and different channels of revenues for services. But at the end of the day is, if we want to have a public infrastructure, does this become part of the public roadmap and strategy of a country, not of an institution, but of a country? I think it would be simpler if we go on a country level. So the question is, yes, we have started. Do we know? No, not yet.
No, yeah. I mean, I think that reflects the hard conversations that most open infrastructures have to engage in, because there always is also this free rider problem where, as you say, Zenodo, for those of you who don't know, is a very large generalist repository based at CERN. But there's a free rider problem with open infrastructure, which is it can be used by anyone without them having to pay for it. So we need, institutions, we need funding models that are sustainable for a lot of these services in the future. And sorry, go ahead.
And one, as I said before, the European Open Science Cloud has been a catalyst in all the services, because now the question is not just only about the scholarly communication services, but think about services as computing and storage, because the graph, as we are saying, as you're viewing it, it requires a lot of such resources. So the European Open Science Cloud now in Europe has put this agenda on the table. So the business models of open science is now entering the conversation.
Thank you, Natalia. So I guess there's no other questions. I think I would like to pose one more question, and perhaps this is most relevant for Talia, Vivian, and Pierre. And really, it's just about making the case for our institutional participation in these kind of infrastructures. Because I think from the national perspective, we can see the value for our funders, but sometimes we struggle with the rationale for the institutional benefits for participating in these services. And so I wonder if you have any pieces of advice around that to give us. Maybe we can start with Vivian.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think a lot about the conversations that we often find ourselves having on our campuses about institutional repository, and how the word institutional sometimes is not, it doesn't land successfully, because our researchers hear that and it sounds parochial. It sounds like the visibility will only be very local, and that's not where they see their research. They see their research as being on the world stage. And so I think the fact that OpenAIRE, we can speak to the international visibility, is a tremendous part of a new narrative that we can use for speaking about repositories. I think it's really, really critical.
Thank you, Vivian. Well, I invite Pierre or Talia to make comments if you have anything to add to that. Talia?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Kathleen. Just to build on what Vivian mentioned, I absolutely agree with what Vivian put forward. I think the other thing that we must keep in mind is that libraries have a well-established long-term stewardship role. And that makes the libraries at our campuses very key stakeholders as we talk about research at an international scale, visibility at an international level, and the longevity of research outputs as well. So I think it positions us very well to speak to this point. With the increase of digital content, of course, brings the need for reimagining of workflows and infrastructure, no longer stacks, but instead digital infrastructure. And with initiatives such as Portage, Further, McMaster hosting Canada Research, we demonstrate that we're able to work very, very collaboratively to augment the visibility of Canada Research at a national and an international scale. So I think we have demonstrated our ability to advance this work in a very kind of long-term stewarding role within the digital imperative context. So I think those are things that we should be proud of.
Thanks, Talia. Matthew?
Can I just jump in quickly? Because the one thing that's unique about the Tri-Agency Research Data Management Policy that was released in March 2021 is the requirement that institutions develop and publish strategies for supporting research data management. And I know many institutions have developed strategies and have a strong relationship with libraries and research offices, but those that don't are going to be looking to do that. And libraries are very, very well placed to be a part of those strategies, and certainly services such as this project are going to be an important part of both the supports that institutions provide and helping them to understand where the opportunities and the needs for other supports are.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Matthew. Anyone have anything else to add? I mean, I think those were very important points, Vivian and Talia, that you made, and we need to hold on and craft some messages around this so that it resonates with our institutions and the communities there, the researchers, but also the administrators. So, well, on that note, I think we should wrap things up. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Natalia, for taking your time again. Thank you, Matthew, Vivian, Pierre.
Thank you.
and Talia. Let's hope that we continue to advance this project. And for those of you who are attending our next webinar, stay tuned, and we'll be sending out the agenda and the dates for that shortly. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you all.